Hi, everyone. I am Lori Ann. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, and I am with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. And this is how we see it.
And today we're very pleased to have Melody Johnson with us today. She's going to be speaking about children and literacy, and it's pretty exciting what she's done for them. And we're going to learn more about this right now.
Okay.
So,
Thank
Roy?
you so much, Lori Ann, for bringing me onto your show. And thank you, Roy, for having me today. As an experienced educator that specialized in reading and behaviors for children, I realized that there was a huge need for this area, especially now with how COVID is working and schools are getting shut down again. It's like a kind of a back and forth thing. The one thing I noticed parents were very vocal about was, what kind of help can I get? So I created a company called Loving Literacy. And what we do is we empower children to read, we eliminate the frustration for the parents, and we nurture the hunger for reading.
That's great. You know, reading, because I've always been a reader since I was a kid. Still read. My wife reads. Both my sons read. So in that respect, in today's time, what are you seeing for kids as far as reading? I mean, with all the distractions, tablets, computers, all the stuff, are kids actually reading more or less?
I want to say it's less, because now that you're at home, we have the comforts of home available to us. We have our iPads, we have our phones, we have the TVs. So kids right now are doing more. If it's a virtual lesson, they'll read then. But outside of that, I'm not seeing a lot of reading. And what I'm actually seeing is parents asking, what can I do to get my kids to read more? That's what I'm finding.
And what would you say in your position, what would you have solutions to that? How do you get your children? Because this, I guess, is where you're coming from, right?
Yes. So one thing that I've found that, and I've done this with my kids, even from little guys, I started a schedule with them. So whether you're homeschooling or you're doing virtual learning, you have to set up a schedule. And that schedule will help them to understand, what are the expectations while you're at home? What is it that you're supposed to be doing at this very hour, at this very time? And I put in reading block times for my own children. And then I started recommending this to parents, and they started taking those suggestions. Like, in the reading blocks could be listening to an audiobook, and it could be also reading an ebook if you don't have the physical book at home. Because I understand some children don't have a lot of books to choose from. So you always have those two resources available to you, and they teach two different skills too. So now if you're integrating both of those two skills with reading and listening, then you're helping them out. What I've also found was many of the parents were saying maybe if they didn't have access, they didn't know who else to go to for these resources. So that's where Loving Literacy comes in. I would tell them like free resources they could find, and even looking into your local library, because there's so many free resources at the local library, and a lot of parents aren't aware of this. I'm talking about even like having pen pals from like across the world, and integrating those reading skills, because now you're doing reading and writing when you're doing a skill like this, and connecting your kids with other people so they don't feel alone at home too. So they feel like they're getting some kind of support. So those were the things that I did, but always having a schedule and having an expectation, and just saying, you know what, guys, electronic time, when we have screen time, that's a separate time from when we read. And just, again, setting the expectation, and show your kids that you're reading too. So not just you saying it, but actually showing it through your actions. Sit down with your favorite book for 30 minutes. How many of us have a phone like this? We all have a phone, right? So we can set an alarm for 20 minutes, and we can just sit down and just read our favorite book, and show them through our actions, not just through our words, the importance of reading and taking the time to read.
Well, now with COVID and everybody being locked in their house, and a lot of people that I'm seeing now are starting to lean more to homeschooling their kids because of all this stuff. So, in what you do, what would be suggestions for people that are homeschooling their kids for
So
literacy?
I think that's an excellent question, Roy. with homeschooling, there's two things you have to do. One, if you're a new homeschooler, you have to find new tools for your child. So it could be additional books, what kind of support is available to your child out there that's free, or if you're able to afford to get a tutor. If you're an old school homeschooling person, that's fine too. You might do more paper-based things, and you might find a parent or a friend in the community that can help your child with that skill. But to get them to learn how to read specifically, it's good if you could have a combination of those skills needed, because you could be one person that helps and does things one way, but if another person is coming in and they've already got the instruction down on how to teach specifically a particular skill, that's going to help your child to grow. And so with the homeschooling, sometimes it looks different for each parent, because it also depends on the need of that child. If that child is, say, special needs and has dyslexia, I would not teach this child that has dyslexia the same as a child that's a on-level reader. I would teach them in a totally different manner. If you have a child that's an advanced reader, you wouldn't teach them the same way as someone that has dyslexia. So it depends on the need of that child. They have to determine that. And how they do that is knowing exactly what it is that they're weak in and what they're strong in.
Well, I know when I was a kid, I had trouble reading and spelling. Of course, back then we didn't know what ADD was. That was why, looking back on it. But my mom used to sit down with me at the kitchen table at night and work with me, and I don't remember her being frustrated or me being frustrated. I just remember doing it. Fast forward, my youngest son he struggled, and my wife used to sit down with him, but they would, but I mean, but she went to the school and they got in some counseling and found some resources for him, so, because I know some people like the mother, daughter, father, son, what dynamic doesn't usually work good sometimes in that situation. Have you found that to be true?
Yes. This is so funny. I just had a conversation with a good friend, and I'll be tutoring her child. And this was exactly the topic that I was doing on a Facebook Live, about how you could have a parent with just a strong-willed child, and they just constantly butt heads. And I think it has to do with how we were taught as a child, and now how children are learning now in school. It's totally different. Mm-hmm. It's like night and day. So your child might be telling you something like, this is not how Miss such and such taught me. You're doing it wrong. But you're saying, no, this is not wrong. This is correct. A perfect example of that would be multiplication. Like how they teach multiplication in school now is totally different than how we learned. It was, you have to learn, yeah. They have something called magic box. You learn the magic box of how to multiply. Whereas old school, I'm used to this, you learned your multiplication tables. And you had to be able to recite them and memorize them, and then they taught you how to apply it. But it's different now.
That's funny. I was a slow reader as well. And my mother gave me Jules Verne, Voyage to the Middle, but it was in French, okay? Because I went to French school. And then she gave me a dictionary. And she said, look up every word you don't know in this book. And I think I was in grade 3 or 4 at the time. So it's a pretty forward book for it. Wow. And I got to love the dictionary more than I did the book. It just intrigued me, I think. But it was great because my vocabulary increased, and she was right. But yeah, I used to be in my room. She said, and any word you don't know, you've got to look it up. And my spelling became much better. I don't know that it helped my reading too much, but my vocabulary was better.
Well, you were talking about kids not having access to books, possibly. Mm-hmm. I live in a suburb of Dallas. There's about 55,000 people in our town. And our teachers in our public schools, they implemented something, they call it a book box. And they put these out in just all around the city. And it's just, you can go up you open this little door and there's books in there, and you pick what you want, take it away. If you got something, you put it back, and just all over the city. And so every year the library has a book drive, the public library. So they'll take a lot of those children's books and set them aside, and the teachers will put them in these book boxes. And surprisingly, one of the elementary school teachers I know, she says that they've got tons of praise through the PTA and through organizations in the city about how these people, the parents, appreciate having these books available for their kids, because in some places parents really couldn't afford to go out and buy them the books.
Yeah.
So, and they said it's helped their child being able to read and have an interest in reading. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
That's actually a bit of a good segue to yours. How did you come up with this concept, and what kind of mindset does it take for someone to run a business like this?
So I came up with the concept back in November. So in November, what ended up happening was I was starting to feel a little bit different towards the classroom. I just felt like there was a shift internally in me that I needed to do something different, but I still wanted to be able to teach. I wanted to teach on my own terms, and I wanted to be able to focus on the things that I felt were really important for the children. So at some point, my daughter became very ill. We had to, so I had to make a shift. I had to make a really big choice whether to leave the classroom or to try to stick it out and stay. But at that point, I couldn't. She has epilepsy. So I had to make a choice, because every time the school would call me, I'd have to go pick her up. But at this point, it was becoming pretty dire. She had been hospitalized, and I said, you know what, I've got to make a choice. And it was one of the hardest choices that I ever had to make, because all of my kids, I consider them my babies, even my students. So it's like I'm leaving my baby for my babies. So that was really tough. But when I left the classroom, it gave me the opportunity to really evaluate what is it that these kids need at home, and how are the parents surviving? Like, what are they doing to provide the assistance for their children while they're getting virtual learning? So I started reaching out to those parents and just asking them if they were okay, are they having any trouble with anything? And then that's when the emails started. The emails, the texts. I got an email at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't even know who it was from. They were like, Melody, I'm having problems looking for such and such. And I'm like, who is this? And they were like, oh, this was a parent from like last year, like kindergarten. And I said, okay, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I promise you I'll call you back in about 4 hours. But based on all of that feedback and the urgency that parents had, that's where Loving Literacy was born. I decided I needed to be able to make a company, a place where parents can go to, where they can get community, find free resources, and find exact personalized materials for their children. Not just some random worksheet you find on the website, and then you're rolling the dice, really, because you don't know if that's really aligned to your child's needs. You don't know if it's just too much or if it's not enough. So that's where I come in, and I create everything in-house. All materials, they're Common Core aligned. So I've been through the Common Core standards a lot for each material. And on top of that, I also provide the different mindset, like you were saying, Lorianne. It does require a huge shift in how you think, how you approach things. So instead of saying, oh, this is just too hard, I can't do this, I can't serve every kid. No, you come with the approach of, you know what, this child did this one task, they can do anything, they can accomplish anything. And when you have an attitude like that, you're not only servicing the children, but you're servicing the parents too. The parents that felt like they could not teach, the parents that felt like there was no hope because they couldn't find a resource for their child that has a special need. Or the parent that's like so busy being in 100 Zoom calls, they're like, how am I going to teach my kid this information? Well, you know what? That's where Loving Literacy comes in, and they eliminate that. We come in, we do the teaching, and all the parent has to do is put their child in front of the computer.
Wow. I've got one of my daughter-in-laws is I think she's teaching third grade now. She's an elementary school teacher. Well, they have two sons, one 5 and one 10. So she theoretically is supposed to be teaching this time, this time, this time. Okay.
Yes.
So then in her other off time, she's homeschooling because their kids can't go to school. So she's trying to work with a fifth or sixth grader and a kindergartner of her own. And she says she's overwhelmed because the parents don't respect her time. She says she's getting emails hourly, calls. She says it's just constant bombardment, you know. And she says it's really overwhelming her. Are you finding that same issue?
So yes. So when I was before I left the classroom, that was a normal thing. Like I would get emails sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was up at 4 o'clock grading, doing assessments, entering data for my students. That was the time that I woke up. I would leave to get to work by 5 o'clock in the morning. That's when my day really started at like 3:45, 4 o'clock. And then I would come home like 6 o'clock in the evening, sometimes 7, because I would be so busy trying to get everything done, just trying to get through emails. And it doesn't stop, like it would just keep coming. So what I had to do for myself, I had to create boundaries. And I love my parents and I love being able to help them. But I noticed that was one of the downfalls that I had for myself because I wanted to help so much. I didn't have a boundary. So I had to set parameters, and that would be, you can email me between 7 and 4. After 4 o'clock, I don't answer until the next day, because you need to have time for yourself and you need to have time for your family. And Roy, you know as much as anything, I'm sure your daughter's probably told you 100 stories about being a teacher, but it's a big sacrifice. You sacrifice a lot of things that people don't normally understand. Like when you buy stuff for your classroom, they don't understand that's actually the teacher's money. A lot of that, even though you get a small stipend of maybe $100 or $200, that does not even cover half of the supplies that you really need for these children. And sometimes that includes buying kits for your classroom so the kids can read. Like every book that I had in my last classroom, I had over 1,000 books. And I had to let it go because I can bring it home. It was just too many books to have. So I just had to let them go, and it was okay because that means another kid will be able to read it. But in this case, yeah, teachers make a lot of sacrifices. They have to have those boundaries, and I put those boundaries in place for myself. So I have certain time slots where parents could also contact me. So I would say, hey, click on this link. We can make an appointment, and then we'll work together. But that's important. You have to have boundaries, and you have to put some kind of you time in. That's another point. You have to make sure that you have, like you're doing some sort of meditation, something to get your mind fixed for the beginning of the day. For me, I do prayer meditation. Like that's just my thing. I make sure I'm telling God, thank you every day. Thank you for blessing me with a family. Thank you for blessing me with the abundance of students that have these needs so I can bless the parents. And I do this every day because I know that was a gift that I was given. And just having a spirit of gratitude, being thankful for being able to do that every day. If you have that thankful spirit, it just comes.
You were talking about how much teachers actually spend for this stuff for their classroom.
Yes.
I was never aware of this till my daughter-in-law. And, she would always ask on her birthday or holidays, give me a gift card for this teacher supply store. And that's not for me, so I need to get stuff for my students. She was a ESL, she was bilingual.
Oh.
She's from Honduras, so she was Spanish. But when she first started teaching, she taught kindergarten. And a lot of her, in the school she was in a real poor part of town. A lot of her kids were Hispanic, couldn't speak English. Parents couldn't speak English. In her classroom, it was mixed, Anglo and Hispanic. She would have to teach half a day in Spanish, half a day in English. The concept was the people that didn't know Spanish were learning it, people that know English were learning it. But and the thing that was hard for her with parents is a lot of them were working 2 or 3 jobs, And when the kids weren't doing well, they would blame her,
Yes.
you know. And she said, I'm just a teacher. I'm not the parent. You have to help them at home. I don't have time. I've got to work 2 jobs, you know. So she struggled a lot with that.
And you know what? I think as all teachers have struggled with that issue as well. So with my particular class, they always filtered the students that spoke English as a second language, because for me, that was a good place where I could communicate with parents. And I used Google Translate for every single thing. And every bit of Spanish that I knew from Duolingo, I used that too. And so what I did was I created a strong community. And this is key too. If you create a strong community, you can start delegating things within your classroom. So you don't have to do it, because as teachers, we want to do it all, but you can't. Like, that's just unrealistic. So what I did was, I'll give you an example. This past year, I had a little girl that was from Finland. She spoke Spanish, but spoke very little English because she lived in Spain for a few years. Very unique. Never came across anything like this before. I had a child that would sit next to me, and she only spoke fluent Spanish. So when I gave instructions, I gave them in Spanish first, and then I told them in English. Well, the girl from Finland knew Spanish, so boom, she already knew the instructions. And then when my other student found out that she could speak Spanish, that's when you started seeing the connections in class. She started sharing how to say things in English. The other girl started sharing things, how to say other things in Spanish. So if you create that community within the classroom, you're going to get a lot done. You'll have amazing partnerships, and you will see growth. You will see growth with kids, because now you're doing the one thing, you're forming positive relationships. And that is ultimately what they need when they're younger.
Say that. Sorry.
Go ahead, Laura. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, need to say that everything really that you're talking about now transfers into adulthood and entrepreneurship. As a new entrepreneur, you want to do everything, but once you collaborate and build a community, you can start working with people to do more together. So this is a good lesson for them to learn when they're younger, so that they can bring it into adulthood as well.
Yes.
So are you seeing a lot of Hispanic needs in what you have as well?
So for the community that I serve, it was a bit of a mixed community, but a lot of people were in more of the higher tier of brackets of earnings. So you could see the difference. And I knew who had technology at home and who didn't. So whoever did not have technology, I did all of that technology within the classroom early in the morning, as soon as they came in, so that way they wouldn't miss out. But what you're also finding is, because they're not speaking English at home, sometimes they don't have books in English at home available to them. So that's where you see a bit of the struggle. So if we could provide ebooks for those children, or again, audiobooks, you can go to your local library and you can actually borrow books online and have them listen to it and read it. That would help them significantly. Even if they can't understand all of the words, just reading like the basic books like Dr. Seuss, that would help them.
Yeah. So that's what you do. You help guide those people to those resources that they don't have, correct?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I still have Dr. Seuss books, by the way. I still have my Dr. Seuss books. I love them. I'm sorry, I just love them. They make you smile when you're feeling a little bit down. You pull one out. What's that?
Is there anything you still don't have?
Yes, a lot of my books. I used to have 1,000 books, and when I went from 2,400 square feet to 600 square feet, yeah, that kind of had to go. But yeah, no, there are a few things. But I do miss them, because I'll go out and go, oh darn, I had that book.
See, I had Fox and Socks, and the kids they loved that particular book, because it had a lot of like short sounds. It almost covered almost everything I needed for the kids. And so we would often read that book, and they just loved it. And then the key for this one was, it not only taught them fluency and it taught them how to pronounce words well, but it also taught them the importance of paying attention. Because as you say this particular word, it was what was called a tongue twister type of book. So to hear the kindergartners try to read this to each other was hilarious sometimes. And they'll correct each other. Believe me, they'll correct each other. They'll say, you know, you're not saying it right. Look at that word again.
Yeah, that's so. So one question: do in your experience, have you had someone from, say, you had a student maybe 4 or 5, 6 years earlier that came back to you and thanked you for what you did for them, or let you know you made an impact on them?
I've had children from pre-K come to me, and oh, I'm telling you, it's one of those feelings. It's like, it makes you feel like that was the best gift you've ever gotten because
Right.
you imparted a great gift to them. And I had one parent, she was telling me her child was always behind, always behind. But she said when I got her in pre-K, and she said after that in kindergarten,
Sorry.
it's okay. She took off and she was always reading something. In fact, she became so advanced, like she got some kind of special honor in school. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. The fact that she was struggling in the beginning and she was able to overcome that, to me, that speaks such volumes. You're empowering that child to say, hey, you know what? If I can do this one thing, I know I can do the next thing. And it's not just to reading, it's for things that we accomplish in life.
Exactly, because you know your quote, you're doing your job. You're out there every day. You're doing your job, right? And you know, and sometimes you get frustrated. You don't know. You know, is it worth it? Am I? You know. But then when somebody comes back and tells you, and you have no idea, right? You have no idea.
Yeah.
And they come back and tell you, I want you to know, you know, you did this for me. You know, if it wasn't for you, you know, I mean, there's no amount of money that can replace that. None.
It's priceless.
It is. And to think, you know, golly, I didn't have any idea they even cared or whatever, you know, and for them to come back and tell you you made an impact on their life. That's pretty awesome.
Part of it is also loving what you do. When you love what you do, you'll give way more than what's required of you. And when you do that, you're planting a seed of loving that particular thing. And that one seed spreads. And I think of it almost like a weed. So not all weeds are bad, but for this particular instance, you know, when you're planting that seed and it spreads, it's going to spread into other areas of their life. So reading is the one academic area that affects every single academic area. It doesn't matter, even if it's math. And when you know those academic areas, it'll help you in life. And it'll also open up doors of possibility. It'll open up your creativity. It'll open up your imagination. And that's what kids need right now, especially now, because they don't have that at home. We don't know what these kids have when they're at home. Some of them don't have anything. Maybe that when going to school was what they had, that was how they were getting love. But having the ability to read and being able to escape the everyday struggles, that is what will help them get through this COVID time. And that's why I support reading so much. That's why I'm a big advocate of reading.
I like the pen pal idea too, to reach out there. Roy and I are pen pals as well, by the way. We still write. I have quite a few friends because it's an art that people have lost. And I just think that it's just so important. And it's so lovely to go to the mailbox and get something that you get to hold and read and then write. So it works for both levels, right? So.
It is. And let me tell you, there's something about when I tell kids, and I've done this as early as kindergarten, I would tell them, everyone's going to read your work. And when you tell them that, they want to make sure it can be read. So they'll ask for help, or if they are not sure, they will definitely ask another person for help. So something that I used to do in my classroom, goes back to community now. I used to have jobs. Everybody had about 2 jobs in my classroom. And it was beautiful because everybody took pride in their job. I had a person that was the table inspector. They would inspect the tables. If they seen crayons out, they would call call the 3 students over. I need you to come here. They'll go to the table. I see crayons out. You have to put your crayons away. And it gives them a sense of responsibility to let them know, I'm not saying anything. They're telling you. So you've got to keep up with your stuff. And it's just amazing how children come together to help stay accountable with each other.
That's beautiful.
That's a great lesson for them to learn at an early age too.
Yes, it's important because that also teaches them a sense of independence. They don't have to always go to the teacher. They can go to other people that need help, you know, that they can get that information from. So having that sense of independence is going to help them in the higher grade levels too. So they'll know, oh, I have other resources. I think I'll be okay. Let me try it this way first.
Yeah.
So where would anybody find you, Melody? Give us information about where they could find you.
Thank you so much, Lorianne. You can find me on Facebook. So you can find me under Loving Literacy. You can also find me on my website, lovinglit.com.
L-I-T?
Yes, L-I-T, Loving Lit.
Nice and short. That's a beautiful website name.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time, Melody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate being a guest.
I really enjoyed it, and you know, I think what you're doing is amazing. I really do.
You.
And there is a huge need for it. Huge.
Excellent. It is. It is. I'm very grateful and blessed to be able to give that to parents.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you for being with us. And I am that gal from Milton, Ontario with?
I'm that guy, Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas.
And we'll be chatting again soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.